Thank you very much for waiting. We'd like to start the keynote lectures now. First speaker is a technical officer of World Health Organization Center for Health Development, Dr. Ryoma Kayano. Dr. Kayano is to talk about outbreak situation and measures against COVID-19 infection in the world. Now, Dr. Kayano, please. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Ryoma Kayano, the technical officer of WHO. I'm speaking from Kobe, where WHO center is. Since I'm in a private room, I'm not wearing a face covering. First, the governor of Fukuoka, Mr. Hattori, and the other members of executive committees, I'd like to thank you for allowing me to participate in this occasion. And Dr. Yokokura, Dr. Kurauchi, together with those wonderful speakers, I'm happy to be a part of contribution to this forum. I hope today's forum will be a fruitful one for those online viewers too. Now, One Health, I had a chance to be involved in the One Health for the first time 6 years ago. Together with U.S. international meeting of One Health was held in Nagasaki 6 years ago. After that, I started to work for WHO, H5, H7, such novel influenza, and MERS, and such zoonosis, and AMD. Those are the areas I start to be involved in WHO activities. And I came to realize once again that it is becoming more and more important that human and animal health are related so closely each other. And last year, we started to see the COVID-19 infection, and this requires all of society approach for us to work against this challenge. Now, by the way, Fukuoka Prefecture, I'm related somehow too. I spent my younger days when I was a junior high student and before entering the university in Fukuoka Prefecture. Dr. Yokokura, I work together in relation to JMA. Now, let me start my slide. I'm speaking from the viewpoint of WHO, focusing on the outbreak situation and measures against COVID-19 infection in the world. I hope you are seeing my slide now. First of all, this is the current status as of yesterday evening, and we have more than 100 million cases confirmed, and it continued to increase, and more than 2.1 million deaths. Those countries with a high number of cases are the US, India, Brazil, and others. And these countries mostly have a large number of deaths too. And if you look at this trend on the January 30th, the WHO issued the public health emergency, and COVID-19 cases continue to increase, exceeding 10 billion, 20 million, and so on. So that is the trend in the world. And if you look at the numbers, it's mostly increased, mostly in Americas and Europe. This shows the situation by each region. Now, highest number is seen in North and South Americas, including Brazil, and followed by Europe. And then we have Southeast Asia, and this is mostly coming from India, and the Eastern Mediterranean, or what we may call Middle East, Africa, and the Western Pacific, which includes Japan, Korea, China. Now, first, where does this virus come from and how it spread it? You may be interested in this topic. And currently, WHO team is in China for investigation. According to the genetic testing, according to the genome analysis, the currently existing virus is confirmed to derive from that discovered in city of Wuhan 2019. But that is how we see with regard to the propagation of the world, it's not coming only from China. All the countries may be involved, and all the countries, every single country should work together for prevention of propagation. Now, please take a look at this picture. The dark areas in the night and the brighter areas are in the daytime, and the yellow spots. You may have seen this already, but these yellow points are the airplanes. So this is the world before COVID-19. Around the clock, every single day, seamlessly, the goods and the human beings continue to move. Under such circumstances, the COVID-19 infections became spread. And if we do the tracing, certainly it did come from the virus detected in China, but it went to Europe and then to US, and then again going back to Europe or the South America, and from Europe to Africa and to Japan. So it goes back and forth, and together with mutation. So in all the countries, we were not successful in containing the viruses, and as a result, infection spread all over the world. So it's not that one single area or countries can do their job to stop this infection. Everyone should work together. Now, this regional situation, as you can see, we have higher numbers in the Americas and Europe. And why the number is so low in Western Pacific, including Japan, China, Korea? And this is under investigation now. Western Pacific area, including Japan, China, Korea, and 30-some countries are included in this category. And we can think of about 4 categories of infections, and some increasing rapidly, such as Philippines, increasing and not decreasing, and repetition of that. And Japan is one of them. That's category 2. And it increases once, but mostly stayed at low level, such as in Cambodia, Malaysia. That's another category. Category 4 is an area where infection was not detected in mostly islands, and about 12 areas. So infection is being spread, but compared to other areas, number of cases are still lower. Now, why? Especially after September, quite rapid expansion of infection was seen in Europe. We did various investigations looking into this to find that younger generations accounted for the majority of newly detected cases, and especially younger generation may not have a sufficient observation of public health measures and that may be one of contributing factors. Why number is so low in Western Pacifics? There are several opinions behind this. One of which is that related to the Asia-Pacific Strategy for Emerging Disease and Public Health Emergencies meetings. As a result of this meeting, for example, we had a polio and other infectious disease measures in Asia-Pacific areas, and because of that, quite a good capacity building was established. So long-term investment had an advantage. Even so, we still need to strengthen such capabilities even more. And indeed, if you look at this, the multi-source surveillance was conducted between December 30th to January 30th, and surveillance mechanism for polio, surveillance mechanism for influenza, surveillance mechanism for pneumonia, and each surveillance may be somewhat rough, but with combination of those, the quite detailed surveillance could be done. So, as such, the measures were conducted in a repeated manner in this Western Pacific region, but this may not explain everything, so still investigation is ongoing. Very simply, that was the current state of infection.
Next, I would like to talk about the countermeasures implemented by WHO so far. Within the United Nations, WHO is in charge of health. It's a dedicated organization on health. And the objective is to attain the attainment of all people of the highest possible level of health. And this is the constitution of WHO, which was established 7th of April 1948. I don't mean to preach preachers, because you are all probably healthcare professionals, but the definition of health, according to WHO, is health is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely an absence of disease or infirmity. And we want to make sure that the highest level of health can be attained by all people. 7th of April is the establishment of WHO, and we celebrate this day as World Health Day every year. And every year we select an important global health topic and try to educate the world. For example, in 2011, we selected the theme of AMR, which is deeply related to One Health. And we had a lot of infectious disease, but now we have hypertension and also diabetes, as well as depression in 2017. Diseases that are more unique to the modern society. And in 2018 and 2019, we had a day on universal health coverage, which is strongly related to the idea of pandemic control. And in 2020, we have the nurses and midwives. Their activities and their efforts are being celebrated in 2020. And in 2021, the theme is going to be healthcare workers. This is the organizational structure of WHO. About 150 chapters exist throughout the world. 3 layers. We have country offices. First of all, this is mostly focused on developing nations and looking at providing support and advice for the health policy of different countries. North America, Western Europe, Central Europe, Japan, Australia. These advanced nations don't have the country offices because WHO believes that these countries can run things based on their own organizations. So, for example, MHLW in Japan has a contact person of WHO. These country offices are supervised by 6 regional offices. So 30-some countries, including China, Japan, and South Korea, are included in the Western Pacific region, and the headquarters is in Manila, the Philippines. And Takeshi Kasai is heading this regional office. He's a Japanese person. There are 6 regions altogether, and they have regional office directors. And everything is, of course, organized by the headquarters in Geneva. Approximately 3,000 people work here, and there are about 8,000 people throughout the world working for WHO altogether. Now, what about Kobe? What kind of a role does it play? It is not a country office, because Japanese healthcare system advice and support is not really necessary from WHO. But Kobe has a Kobe Center, which is a very unique office. In 1995, after the Hanshin earthquake, as a symbol of a recovery, part of WHO headquarters was invited to be relocated to Kobe, and the center was established for that purpose. So this is just one segment or section of WHO headquarters. And this is the only such research center in the world. UHC and also health crisis management, disaster management, and also health crisis management, including infectious diseases, are covered by our policy research based on scientific evidence. We try to work with academia throughout the world and practice day to day. So I have just talked about how WHO works. In 2020, last year, what happened with WHO? COVID-19 is just a very common type of virus, but COVID-19 infections was a completely unprecedented situation, and everybody was confused, and there was a lot of trials and errors, and WHO is no exception. We had a very tough year, and we tried to work things out with various countries around the world. Please look at this map. In 2009, when the pandemic influenza was spreading, it started from the US and spread throughout the world very quickly. This is what was happening. Again, this strain was a huge threat, but fortunately or not fortunately, the death rate, the case fatality rate was not so high. H1N1 pandemic influenza remained as a seasonal influenza, and now it's a part of their day-to-day lives. So it didn't really disappear, but it somewhat calmed down. In 2016, there was MERS, and again, a very shocking incident. Really endemic. Close contact with a camel should cause this disease and nowhere else. But one traveler flew back to South Korea, and more than 100 people were infected, and more than 30 people died. This was a very major incident, letting people know that this type of incident can happen. MERS was not that contagious, so it could be contained, which was quite fortunate. Whether it's the pandemic influenza or MERS, if one step was taken in a wrong way, maybe we could have ended up with a pandemic situation like COVID-19. So we have been worrying about something like this COVID-19 situation for the last 3 or 4 decades, and finally in 2020, it really happened. And even after 12 months, we are only beginning to see a very dim light at the end of the tunnel. More than 100 million infected, more than 2 million died. The situation is very grave. Major damage to the economy as well. This is not a situation that can be resolved by one single country anymore. Against such background, we try to collaborate with the various countries around the world as WHO, and we have been working on international health regulations for a very long time. WHO signatories should follow these rules in case of this type of emergency or crisis. So I showed you the global map earlier with all the airplanes flying. Consider that situation, and it's very difficult to do border screening for infectious diseases. As you may know, there is a latent period, usually 2 days to 1 week. Once a virus enters the body, until you actually see the symptoms, it takes about 2 days up to 1 week. And during this period, these carriers can cross the border very easily. So border screening doesn't really work. You cannot really identify the carriers. And they would enter the country and spread the disease. And this kind of situation, scenario, can happen anywhere in the world. Do we shut down all the borders of every country? That's not really possible, although some countries are trying to do that right now. And if there is a dangerous infection and if there's an emergency, how should the information be shared and reported? And how should we implement the countermeasures? We need to have a common approach in order to contain such infectious disease. And that's what this international health regulation is for. By implementing the regulations globally, we need to deal with these diseases. But there is a very important learning. No global health security without local health security. Think about Ebola, hemorrhagic fever, up to 2016, and another endemic in Africa recently. We have these rules, and state of emergency can be declared. People can implement countermeasures to contain the disease. We try to do that, but can we really succeed? That's really down to the implementation on the ground, how successfully we can do that. If there is no capacity to do that on the ground, then we cannot really implement these countermeasures, and this is the most challenging aspect of this effort. From the academic perspective, or from the experience of developed nations, we can talk about suggestions of what to do and how to deal with it. And if you have enough resources and enough capabilities, enough people, and if you have good systems and rules in place, and once you issue the order, if all the people can follow, then the measures may work. But not every country has all of those factors in place. So there is a gap between the local capability versus what they need to do. Once this kind of pandemic or global crisis occurs, how can we really respond? This is a very challenging problem.
Now, under such circumstances, in 2020, WHO conducted various activities learning from the past examples. This is the word of WHO Director General Dr. Tedros. And our activities may be that most people never see, but what we do is somewhat complicated. Now, specifically, what kind of activities were we involved? I'm going to explain one by one. But the initial 2 weeks, we are quite focused in what we have to do, and then gradually it's expanded. First, guidance, coordination, and leadership. This is an unknown virus, and we had concern and anxiety everywhere in the world. How should we tackle this unknown virus? And many countries came to WHO with questions on what they should do, and we made decisions based on the consultation in the first 2 weeks. The testing methods for virus and treatment and the information for the national public. On those points, we issued the first series of advice. That's the first 2 weeks. Using the specialist network, we promote the development of various tools such as the vaccine treatments and diagnosis. And after the first genetic sequences shared in several days, the laboratory test was developed. And then in several weeks, it's delivered to labs on the world. Testing is not always simple. It may be used in Japan, but may not be so in Afghanistan. So testing kits should be established with a stable supply. And somewhere, someone, that's a kind of job we need to do. And that's one important thing I'd like to emphasize. And also, delivering knowledge and supplies are also important. Information and knowledge and supplies are provided. For example, PPEs, masks, goggles, gowns, or diagnostic solutions and reagents and others, as well as the pharmaceuticals. Those are delivered to the world. And information knowledge should be delivered to the world so that everyone can make a similar access. For example, these are the supplies delivered to regions by December 2020, the medical masks and gloves and the respiratory masks such as N95 and the face shields, gowns and goggles and test kits and others. In the world right now, medical supplies are in shortage with the rapid increase of number of patients. So medical equipment or medical supplies are in shortage. And also, this is partly due to the decreased level of supply chain with a number of decreased flights. So securing logistics is important too. One important aspect is about the medical oxygen. In serious cases, medical oxygen is a must in treatment. But it's very difficult to predict the demand of oxygen, and it's not often included in the hospital budget. With this COVID-19 pandemic, especially for low-income or middle-income countries, WHO prepared the medical oxygen with a concentrator, 1,600 of them or more, and the pulse oximeters and the monitors. And with some countries, we are working for the development of oxygen plant too. And also, it's important to provide accurate information. Almost every day, we see maybe information in various media. But this may be the case, this may be the case. With accumulation of those, your anxiety and some expectation may be escalated, but information just continues to be overwritten without certainty. Still, we see an advancement in science and medicine, and based on that, information should be provided, and human resource development should be conducted. That's indeed one of the functions of WHO. And we have an online training, open WHO platform. And you may search this in our website. And the Japanese training is available too. Currently, it's available in 45 languages. It's not that all the courses are provided in all the languages, but in total, there are 149 courses and more than 3.9 million people taking these courses. And there are the explanatory sessions more than 130 times for journalists, and we have social media sessions too. Infodemic, based on the wrong or not correct information, may just excite people or make people anxious, and we share the measures against infodemic together with Facebook and Google's. Now, if you see the followers of WHO Twitters, it's increased from 13 million to 60 million. We use WhatsApp too, not in Japan, but in China, Hong Kong, Africa. WhatsApp is used by quite a large number of people, so that is one of the application WHO uses. And also, we do the direct support to each countries, the emergency medical teams, they are certified by WHO, and also we have national teams. There are 840 of them. Another important thing is about lab testing. In public health, lab testing is a very important foundation. If you don't know where patients are, we need to have a test. But in order to do the testing, you should have necessary goods, and you should have places for testing. That's the situation in Africa. Early in 2020, only 2 countries in Africa had testing capabilities for COVID. But in 1 year, 2/3 of countries had testing capabilities, and by mid-year, all the countries had testing capabilities for COVID-19. So we need to do development like this so that we can build a foundation to move forward. And probably the most of the audience is quite interested in this topic, that is a vaccine. The vaccine development is conducted by many pharma companies and the organization, and the WHO works together with them to build a framework. For example, Solidarity Trial, this is about the treatment. It's a clinical trial to prove the efficacy, and eventually it has to be tested in human beings, and we need to have a network. And more than 30 countries and in more than 500 hospitals, and in total more than 14,000 patients are recruited in Solidarity Trial. And the WHO led this effort. And for vaccine also, those candidates in preclinical evaluation and those in clinical evaluation, we set the standard for their evaluation so that people in the world can follow the same guidance.
More than 200 vaccines are being developed in the world right now. And 10 or 20 vaccines are now in phase 3. In other words, just before allowed for human use widely. So there is raw inactivated vaccine and also RNA vector vaccines, protein, various different types in development. Efficacy and safety of these vaccines are now being verified. Once the safety and efficacy are established to some extent, then emergency use authorization will be granted. And if further efficacy and safety are established, then WHO can endorse such vaccines and deliver it through the global supply. One important point about this is a mechanism called ACT Accelerator, specifically the COVAX facility. ACT Accelerator means the following. Let's say we have a testing method, or we have a treatment approach, or we have a vaccine that we know that works. In the end, we have to protect everybody in the world. Otherwise, there is no end to this pandemic. If the developed nations finish protecting their people first, that doesn't really end the global pandemic. Even the poorest countries need to be able to vaccinate their people before we can see the end of this pandemic. Technology, treatment, vaccine need to be used in a fair manner. Vaccination requires injection. You need a needle, and needle injection can only be done by licensed people. So do you have enough doctors and nurses to do that in that country? That's another question. We need to deal with this properly, and we need strong support from those countries that have resources to those that don't have the resources, or from one organization to another. So we established this framework in 2015. ACT Accelerator, inexpensive testing kit. With the support of Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, we have already prepared 120 million, and 20 million have been sourced and shipped out. We are also training personnel. More than 20,000 have completed their training. So 500 million times of testing should be done by the mid of this year. And once we can do the testing, we can follow with the other steps. We're building the foundation now. Dexamethasone steroid is the only effective treatment with evidence, and 2.9 million doses will be sourced. And for the other 21 treatments, 15 clinical trials are being followed up. And once we establish efficacy of these treatments, we will coordinate so that the treatment can be provided in various countries. For vaccine, we have a mechanism called the COVAX facility. Funding coming from different parts of the world, and enough dosage or doses to be secured and distributed throughout the world. We still need additional funding for this. So this is what we have done in 2020. As you can see, it is a broad scope. Various mechanisms and countermeasures are needed. So low-income and middle-income countries do not have the capacity which need to be increased. And we need global attention to this challenge. And that has been the center focus of our activities. Last but not least, I would like to talk about what to do next for the future. This is the most important message I want to share with you today. Actually, there are 4 points. One thing we know at this point in time is that biologically speaking, we cannot really expect the human body to evolve to be completely protective against any kind of virus. It is not possible. Given that understanding, we cannot really leave this to nature. So what can we do? We have to develop treatment that cures or develop vaccine. And it's very difficult to develop a new treatment for a virus. Dexamethasone can be used to save people from dying when they have severe symptoms, but we don't have a quick fix. Our biggest hope is that artificial immunity can be created within human body so that we don't die from being infected from this virus. In other words, protection through vaccination. This is probably the closest approach to what we are aiming for. But up until everybody in every country is protected, we're not protected. Think about measles, for example. There were a few cases remaining in a few number of countries, but it spread very quickly. Same thing can happen with COVID-19. Even if the majority of the countries are protected, if we neglect some of the other countries, then it might spread once again. Until everybody, every single person is protected by vaccine, we cannot really protect the whole human being. So again, I wanted to share that this is what we're aiming for. There are two problems to this. One is so-called vaccine nationalism. Vaccines are now becoming available. 40 to 70 million doses already been shot. But 95% of such vaccinations are done in only the nations, only the rich nations, and they're not willing to share this with the rest of the world. And this is the situation that we're facing. In the end, every country has to be able to distribute the vaccine for everyone. And this is a strong message by WHO. Another problem is concerns and fears against vaccination. People try to heighten the fear and anxiety, and people are unable to calculate risk versus benefit because they're overwhelmed by fear in some parts of the world. I don't think Japan is an exception, because misinformation about vaccine is widely seen. If people believe that vaccination can kill you, they would not want to be vaccinated. The vaccines are still under development, and there is no vaccine with completely established safety and efficacy, but phase 3 has been completed in some of these vaccines. So we know the efficacy and safety to some extent, and we want to cover a big population, and if there are problems, we will try to verify and further improve the safety going forward. So it's important to understand the facts, and if there are problems, you should go to the hospital immediately. And with this is still not perfect, but this should not be used as an excuse to avoid vaccines, because finally we're beginning to see a dim light at the end of the long tunnel, and we don't want to see that light disappear. Another thing I want to emphasize is that just because we have vaccine available, it doesn't mean that we can discontinue the public health measures. Yes, vaccine can help in order to help people from getting severe diseases. But vaccination, we don't know whether that will protect people from transmitting this disease to other people. So wearing face shields, washing hands, and all the other public health measures will need to be continued until we know that everybody in the world is already safe. And this is what it looks like as a graph. In the beginning, we see a sudden surge in the number of new infections, and all the countries implement strong measures and caution people. And then the increase in the number of cases flattens, and the public health measures decreases, and the healthcare capacity increases, and then number of patients again increases. This kind of up and down wave is happening, or has happened so far. Proper testing, tracing, protecting the vulnerable, and also changing people's behaviors and running campaign for that are very important. Until we reach the final goal that I have explained earlier, we need to continue to do these measures. Finally, I would like to share the 3 messages by WHO before I end my presentation. Be safe, be smart, and be kind. Be safe means that protect yourself, stay safe, and continue to do what you can do until you everybody gets vaccinated. Make sure that you wear face mask, social distance, and wash your hands. These are basically no magic, and very small steps, but they need to be continued. And don't get confused by misinformation. Be smart. Find scientific-based proper information. Be smart. Get information from WHO. And finally, be kind. We need to support each other. We need to be kind to each other. Anyone could be infected at any time, even today or tomorrow. Blaming, discriminating, or persecuting the infected does not make sense. People will try to hide the information if you do that. So consider the fact that you could be infected tomorrow and be kind to other people. Responsibility of being infected cannot be placed on the individual, and people's behaviors, of course, will change based on society's rules and socioeconomic as well as cultural background. Don't think that as long as you are safe and your friends and families are safe, the rest of the world does not matter. That kind of approach does not end the pandemic. Be kind and consider the possibility that you yourself may be infected tomorrow. And finally, universal health coverage. Everyone, everywhere. Every person in every area should be able to live a healthy, happy life. And this is the world that we want to return to. Thank you very much for your kind attention. Thank you very much, Mr. Kayano.